Hello again. Thank you for joining me for another video. So recently I have been watching some of the videos put on by the Soul Foundation about disclosure and UAPs and a group of individuals putting out a certain amount of information through a 2-day conference and then uploading those videos to YouTube. I watched a bunch of them. Now I am already going through a strange period of reflection regarding some events that happened 10 years ago. So having this come out now is like a bit of a trigger that I am attempting to walk through. And so part of my walking through this is just allowing myself some free space here to talk about what's coming up and not being shamed anymore. I think it's really difficult to have a spiritual awakening and then have information about disclosure simultaneously, because a lot of the things that seem very mystical and spiritual, frankly, can also be technological. They can be induced by AI. They can be manipulations of an alien species that we aren't aware of, never been made aware of, always basically mocked as a matter of course in our society for suggesting such a thing. And there's a lot of weird events in my life that have occurred that I can't entirely explain. And because I can't entirely explain them, I feel slightly stuck and immobile, because there is no continuity. There is like two selves, one that has a regular human life and one that is not. And trying to integrate the two while remaining fully human and living in this reality with all of its both normal and mundane experiences, as well as what looks like a mixed reality, what looks like interference and weird robot type people, remote controlled people, like people that are like they don't seem fucking real, sorry to say. People that just like attack you for no reason. There's just so many layers to everything, and I don't know how it is possible that certain people just come to such vast dogmatic conclusions about what it all is. To me, it all seems real. It all seems true. So it seems true on multiple levels. So depending on which level you're looking at it from, it's the best way to describe it is via mystical verbiage or technological verbiage or alien species verbiage. When I originally thought about making a video about disclosure and spiritual awakening, so one of the things that came to my mind, or one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, is because a lot of times it can be really that conclusive type of search, like searching for a conclusive answer, say, oh, that's what all that was. There is a logical reason why XYZ. And that same thing happens in spirituality, in where there's like, oh, this is what God is and this is how reality works. But that doesn't actually answer the question of why is it happening to me this way. And I think that it is true on some levels that we aren't separate from God. It does not mean that you have all of the abilities that an all-encompassing, so we might be made of the same substance, but I don't have your skills just because we're made of the same substance. And so a lot of times the way things come, portrayed in the spiritual teaching, online community is harmful because of that. Because you have blanket statements sent out that are not reaching the soil or the person or the story that actually needs to hear that to be nourished. So it's such a free-for-all. It's such a free-for-all that I get really hesitant about saying anything at all about who I am and what I know and what my life experiences have been, because I cannot deliver this message to the person and people that need to hear it. And because of the way it's set up, it's also quite possible that it's specifically and purposefully sent to people who will use it to harm me, and by whatever means, from small to whatever, little slights, little daggers, little cut downs. And that is a holdover, I think, from this whole idea of hidden truths about the future. So I had weird shit happen. I don't think this is the platform to say so. I think that it is complete fucking bullshit that in the under the guise of security, people are harmed with no recourse. I guess that's the best way I can say it. So who is secured? Who is secured? Who gets to be secured and who doesn't? I guess is the question. And who is making the decision about who gets to be secure and who doesn't? Because it feels like there have been a lot of people who have said a lot of things about a sense of being experimented on. So who is doing the experimenting really? Who is really doing that? And to what end? And why is there no recourse for them except to be mocked and judged for not being a financial and material success? So there is something weird about reality. It doesn't behave the way a linear material reductionist believes that it should or does. I think what we have deduced as a deterministic reality is actually reality on repeat. And attempting to be free of that brings on layers of reaction. I guess that's the best word for it. And how far you can get out of that reaction I think is completely dependent on your support system, essentially. And you can't fake that. There's no faking it. There's no amount of online chatter that does the same thing as someone, telling them your story face to face and having them lean in and receive it. And through their body language, assure you that you are safe. We can't bypass that. It's not bypassable. The need for closeness in that way to reassure that heart coherence, because that's all we actually really care about. Can we have heart coherence with another human being? Nothing else fucking matters. That's the beginning and end of human beings, heart coherence. Because otherwise, the bottom line is we're just providing data. We're not healing, we're not moving forward, we're not coming up with creative solutions. We are providing data for more of this reactionary events, layers, if you will. I want to tell my story because I want to make sense of it. And I need other human minds in order to do that, and there aren't any available to me. Because we're not taking turns. We're all trying to, as quickly as possible, figure out who the fuck we are while we have such a giant mirror in front of us. But the giant mirror has been overlaid with so much obfuscation that who the fuck can get a clear picture? So I guess for now I will put this out and from there decide how much more of my story I want to talk about, because what I've noticed is that when it comes to spiritual awakening and development, conversations about other life forms, other forms of intelligence, can get really muddy. It can get really muddy. It can be really dogmatic in some respects of either, that is just a distraction from true spiritual awakening and you shouldn't think on it. There's a whole bunch of opinions about what they are, who they are, intentions, good, bad, or otherwise, whether it's all a concoction, psyop type scenario. And I don't think we have good answers to any of that. And so it's a hard topic to discuss. Even if you saw a 4-foot fucking dude in your goddamn bedroom, it is completely fucking meaningless at the end of the day. It proves nothing. That's the reality that we're living in, is that we don't know how advanced technological interference onto reality's canvas is. And so your story has to be either fully developed, individualized one that is, you know, cozy, or this like kind of open playfulness, which is frankly hard to get to if you've had a bunch of trauma. And the issue of trauma and how much there is, and the impacts, and the lack of social support for it, that's the part that causes me to go, well, something's going on here. I'm not okay with saying that Spirit is all loving, and simultaneously we should all just be ignoring the trauma that is occurring because it's just part of the play. Doesn't make sense. Lots of black and white thinking around these topics. So I might just try to re-record this, see if I can say something more intelligent. So I realized after watching all of that it was probably sufficiently monotone and boring enough that just about anybody that the only people who are still listening, it's probably for a reason. So if you're still here, I will say a few things now without the monotone voice. I probably will still talk in the monotone voice. It's hard to talk about traumatic and confusing things without a bit of a depressed affect in order to not, experience the full brunt of the emotional whatever it is that you're talking about. So this is probably the safest way to do this. This is within the context of a larger video that most people will check out of early on, and those that remain, hopefully enough got tugged down their spirit to listen. So I guess the thing that I really want to talk about is I watched a couple videos by Tony Rodriguez, and I used to avoid all of the stuff about space talk because I would get triggered, and because so much of it is you can hear the distortions in there. You can hear and feel the parts that aren't fully true, and it bothered me, it irritated me, and so because I have unclaimed memories and aspects that I still try to integrate, I just avoided it all. It's more important to me to have my spiritual self safe and exploring the concept of returning to the soul level peace than figuring out what this place is, if that makes sense. Like, I want to know, well, is my soul okay? How do I keep my soul, on its path? And the rest of it, I just, had to ignore. But anyways, so I watched a couple. I don't know how they came across my awareness, but I watched some of his stuff, and I think I had asked, for more skills. I think I was asking for skills that I had buried to come back. Because I often feel completely trapped. I feel like there is a presence, that there's guardrails, that there is a force. I don't know what the fuck it is. Honest to God, I don't. And it drives me crazy. There's a certain aspect of my life that doesn't make sense, and I go over it and over and over it. We just went through this big, huge reset, and through the process of the reset, I, observed my whole life again. This shit, again, does not make sense. And I don't find comfort in any of the answers that anybody tells me. And so I often come back to the stuff about, the kind of program he was in and others that I've heard, and this sense that there is more than one of me, and there are like breaks in the veil, and so I get clear connection. Now, I'm not talking about higher self. I'm talking about another version of me. And it's hard to make sense of, because the only information that I can give people in this reality is this version of me and what this version of me has been living. And even that, I don't like the feedback I get is bullshit, generally, and gaslighting, almost always, and fear. And so it makes it kind of hard to integrate these things. I guess that's the best way to say it. If you say certain things, a certain type of person is going to reject you outright. There is the mainstream narrative. That's what's allowed. If you say something outside of it, I mean, I had a lady once just kind of like, oh, I was watching Ancient Aliens on History Channel. What am I supposed to do with that when she doesn't feel safe enough to say that she was watching a program about it? I can't comfortably admit the thoughts I have about my own life and the potential for having been a experiencer. You know what I'm saying? So I just keep it all in. I keep it all in, and the problem with keeping it all in is that we heal in relationship. We heal these things. We integrate. We create story with each other and narrative with each other. In order to have social cohesion, I need to know, how do I relate this aspect of my inner world with you? What is your comfort level with this aspect of me? And that's how, integration happens. And so when we have entire topics that we can't comfortably talk about with vast mountains of people, it's hard to have social cohesion, essentially. So I also experienced, so anyways, listening to Tony talk made some of the things that I think about my life and the way it has played out with these weird, strange occurrences. Now he talks about a thing called 20 and back. And I feel like a lifer. And I know that that's a weird thing to say unless you're pretty familiar with that whole thing, but it started when I was a baby. My mom told me stories that they tried to bring her the wrong kid, and she said don't. And And the reason why I think that also is just because, you know, I had a near-death experience during the birth process, and I do believe that there is something about the near-death experience that makes you more likely to be a candidate for whatever the fuck it is. I'm not going to say that I know, because I have no idea. Likely it is a, you know, a far more encompassing, larger spectrum than even they know. So as much as alien interaction that we are aware of, and as much alien interaction as the aliens are aware of, there's probably far greater vast of intelligence and beings and life forms and all of that. But something about, you know, that near-death process is probably what they're attracted to and attempting to get information on, realistically. Just a guess. But it has felt like a part of me has been watched ever since then. And then I have very specific events in my life where the sense of presence and movement in the reality moving. You know, I was when I was a little girl, trigger warning, I don't know how old I was, maybe 6. I want to say I was 6, but it could have been 4 and it could have been 8. I don't have a clear memory of the actual time, but this nudge came over me, and it's like I always kind of had this extra like presence that would guide me. So that's never left. That's always there. It's harder now. It's almost like I can't fully embrace it right now because I feel so much interference. I don't know how to say it better. That it gets used against me in a manner of speaking. That's probably a good way to say it. So a sense of nudging, and those of you who've had spiritual nudges, like it's unmistakable. It kind of like your whole being kind of like connects with this like energy, and it's a physically, for me, I sense the energy. Everything kind of shifts. My awareness becomes like whole body awareness as opposed to individual senses. It's a whole body awareness, and you kind of pay attention to the space in between. And so it was like that. It was like a nudge in that space, and there's a sense of calm and peace that comes over your heart simultaneously. And it nudged me to go out and start my career, kind of like practicing for my career. I think that's the best way to say it. It was like a, you know, that kind of nudge. So I took some writing utensils and I took my pad of paper and I had on a cute outfit and I was going to go be a journalist. And I left my grandma's house, and you know, I was supposed to always kind of like stay. She had a corner lot, and so I was supposed to stay right there. I guess she took up the whole, like, here's the alley and here's the street, and her house and yard was on the whole thing. So I think there was probably supposed to be a house in the corner, but it was just her yard. And I kept walking, and at the end of that block was a very busy street in, you know, a major city, not super far from downtown. So I just got to the end, and I was like, oh, so this is the part where I think I was younger than I recall, because I realized that I couldn't write well enough to be a journalist, and then I was going to have to draw pictures and then come up with the story later. And the the theme in my brain was about being discovered and like, oh, I'm gonna jump ahead of everyone else because I'm so young and I already know what I'm supposed to do with my life, so I'm gonna get a jump start, like this little tiny girl starting her career, and then I'll really be able to compete. And so there was a sense of wanting to be discovered, right? And a man comes up to me, and he had just, now my dad was not really in the picture, right? I saw him every once in a while. He was not a stable figure. He was like a mystery to me, really. And this man had some physical characteristics that reminded me of Dad. And he came up to me and he's like, oh, my mom is an artist. I bet you she can help you. Do you want to go meet her? And little girl brain did not fully register what he was doing. And so little girl brain went with him. And, of course this was a lie, but he brought me to the house that was just a couple down from my grandma. So I'm like, oh, well, it's a neighbor. I know that none of my grandma's neighbors are bad. I knew that. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm okay. I don't know if I thought who knows what little kids think. And, so obviously he was up to no good, brought me in the back and attempted to molest me, and somehow I was able to get away. I jumped to the middle of the alley, and we played tug of war over my arm, and then I felt this like presence just come in. I don't know how to explain it. And he let go of my arm, and I booked it, to my grandma's house, which was really not very far away. And so I escaped. But the damage was done. The damage was done. And it's hard to describe, an event that is so massive like that, and how it changes your interaction with reality. Because realistically, a tiny child against a grown-up there's no contest, right? So that's why it's always felt somewhat manipulated somehow. And I don't know how to explain that better, except for it was a thing that's always made me scared and has made it impossible for me to work. It's made it impossible for me to have a normal life in any sense. And also acutely aware of the spiritual dimension, because I even then knew, without having the words to describe what was happening, knew that there was something else going on here. Now, if it was only that, okay, but then, rinse, repeat, right? I fell off a cliff when I was 17 in front of a boat full of off-duty paramedic and firemen who immediately rescued me. I had a rollover accident right next to a paramedic who immediately rescued me. I was plucked from certain death multiple times. For fucking what? That's the hard part. That's the hard part to integrate. Because all of the in-between has meaning that can't be easily conveyed by the shock of those kind of bigger stories. But there is a bit of a reset. So from 6 to 17, right? That storyline repeats then. Those 10 years, a version of those 10 years has repeated the rest of my life. And then in 2014, it was like the culmination of everything. So 92, I fell off the cliff. 2003 is when you wouldn't even believe me if I told you. You wouldn't even believe me. It's like the Bible got opened up and I understood what all of the metaphors were and how it was used to code reality, and the degree of layering that each one word can have so many different meanings that it's really like an endless script, an endless array. And in that event, I called out, waiting, because I already had enough experiences in my life at this point that I knew that something was there seeing me, and I wanted it to respond. And so it did respond, and so I did a lot of channeling over that week and explained a bunch of stuff to my dad about biblical things and how faith works, I guess, for lack of a better descriptor, how to read things less literally and more from a living perspective, and just that's what it was about. I don't talk about that shit because everyone's got their own dogma about everything. But the important thing to me was that, I channeled beings in a way that was unique to me without knowing any of these things. It had become very clear to me what they were saying. They wouldn't let us have the TV on for that week while they were there, because it was just brainwashing. No TV, careful what you eat. Like, there was just a bunch of directives and explanations and a reinforcing proof. So a reinforcing proof of who and what they are and what they were trying to help me see. And then again, 10 years later, 2014, when I ended up losing everything, and I felt, because from the 2003 event, I basically got medicated for 10 years and tormented. It was just absolute fucking hell. So it's like I somehow broke through, got this big huge download, learned a bunch of shit, and then got immediately suffocated and tortured for the next 10 years. And that's the reaction that I'm talking about. And until 2013-14, and the best I can describe that is that I got plucked back out and rescued. And attempting to make sense of all of this and still be unable to really move outside of the bounds of this very restrictive life is difficult. It's difficult to explain the full story. I'd have to talk for another 4 hours. And I'm hesitant to do so because the tiniest little bit of anything, any of my own interpretation, is met with such disdain by most people, or a need to be declarative over it to me. I don't need anyone to declare what my story means. I have some ideas, and the last 10 years have looked an awful lot like being recovered and going through the process of recovering myself, but not fully out of it. I can't integrate all my memories because I don't have access to all of them. I have flashes. So I think that's all I'll say for now. And if you watched this whole thing, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm here for you. Take care.